Yesterday also saw yet more chaos at the White House. As Jonathan Lemire points out, in 4 days, Trump has fired one inspector general tied to his impeachment, castigated another he felt was overly critical of the coronavirus response, and sidelined a third meant to safeguard against wasteful spending of the coronavirus funds. Oh, and by the way, the acting Secretary of the Navy also resigned yesterday, and the White House press secretary stepped down. And Jonathan Lemire joins us now, also with us, former White House advisor for health policy, professor and vice provost for global initiatives at the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel. He's also an NBC News and MSNBC medical contributor and host of the podcast, Making the Call. It's good to have you all on board.
Jonathan Lemire, talk about the chaos going on in the White House. I got the sense during the transition that Donald Trump wanted the administration basically to be stripped down to Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, and his daughter.
We're
getting there quickly. And in this chaos, the president is firing anybody that can show any independence in making sure that American taxpayers' money is not squandered, and making sure that he doesn't have Orban-like powers.
Joe, you're right. First, just very briefly backing up to the Wisconsin point. It's not just that Wisconsin is a state, it's perhaps the state that is going to matter the most this November. I mean, obviously, the electoral map is perhaps thrown into a little bit of a chaos now because of this pandemic, but a lot of predictions prior to this suggested the whole election may come down to Wisconsin. So it's absolutely worth keeping an eye on going forward there and across the nation. In terms of and we had the president yesterday, mind you, tweet out encouraging Wisconsinites to go out and vote, despite the fact that, of course, that would violate the social distancing policies his own CDC has put out. In terms of the independent inspectors generals, you're certainly right. We have had, particularly since the impeachment trial ended with the president being acquitted by the Republican-controlled Senate, we have seen more of these moves to sort of curtail any kind of oversight within the federal government. We had one inspector general go. He was harshly critical of the HHS one earlier this week. There's certainly those in the White House are anticipating there may be a move there to oust that one as well. He was very fixated in the news conference that she had also served under President Obama, though, of course, that inspector general also served for 8 years under President George W. Bush. But what we're seeing here is it's yet another example of the lack of guardrails and, frankly, any sort of control within that White House. This is the president doing what he wants. We did have the press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, be ousted yesterday. She's not a favorite of new Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. But more than that, and we have a replacement coming in, a Fox News contributor who then went on to become a campaign spokeswoman. But we're seeing it's the president believes that he himself is his best spokesperson. And that's why he's there day after day in the podium.
Jonathan, we just let's be clear. This is, of course, the president's new spokesperson. What did she predict about the president and the pandemic?
Yeah.
No, Joe, you're certainly right. That just a few weeks ago, she appeared on Fox News and predicted that the coronavirus would never get to the American shores, that the president would control it, and it would never become a political issue. She appeared on a show with a Fox News host, mind you, who has since lost her job for saying similar things. And now the Kayleigh McHenry is now, of course, the new White House press secretary, starting in a few days. But what we saw yesterday is also the president is going to be up there and revise history from the podium, and it was attacks on the World Health Organization was the latest front of this, where he was sharply critical of them. He accused them of being in the pockets of China, when in fact the WHO, and perhaps their response not perfect to the pandemic, but they advised an international emergency. They advised travel guidelines well more than a month before the president of the United States did himself.
Yeah, so this is just, the president and the people around him are terrible liars. They're stupid. They look stupid. I'm not saying they're stupid. They look stupid when they lie the way they do. The new spokesperson at the White House told Trish Regan a couple of weeks ago that President Trump would never let the coronavirus come to the United States are terrorists. He was so great that terrorists and the coronavirus were never going to come to the United States, ever. That was a couple weeks ago. That was about the same time. Well, actually, it's probably a little bit after Peter Navarro wrote his memo. But, you know, Nico, we talk about how the president's such a bad liar, how he looks so stupid when he lies and gets caught. It's like the IG that he fired. Remember, he fired the IG, and then he's like, thinks that he got, I think it was Jonathan Karl. Oh, who do they work for? Tell us who they work for, who they work. And he actually thinks that he's going to prove something when we find out the Inspector General, yes, worked through 8 years under Barack Obama. He, I guess, didn't know that the Inspector General also worked 8 years under George W. Bush and had been there since 1999. That's a sort of stupidity that passes for one upsmanship in this White House and among members of Trump's. Well, you just got to say, people that would actually be convinced by that sort of logic are member of a cult now. They're not even Donald Trump supporters. These are the cult-like followers who watch him lie unconvincingly every day, saying nobody could have seen it coming, when there could be books written on the amount of people, even in his own administration, that warned him that it was coming.
Yeah. So President Trump, we talked yesterday about the president not reading, which is something we had noticed about him. He says he never saw the memos detailing a potential pandemic from his advisor, Peter Navarro. Now, this advisor he brings up on stage with him. This is one of his guys. He didn't read a memo or two really pleading with him to look at some serious threats to this country's safety. He didn't read them.
A memo, Mika,
he admits openly.
A memo where somebody in his White House, a close aide, says up to 500,000 Americans can die if the White House is not prepared for it.
Right. So the president, however, says his course of action would not have changed if he had read those memos.
Sir, did you see these memos that reportedly Peter Navarro wrote back in January? When did you see them, and how does these memos sort of square with what you've often said, that nobody could have predicted this? It sounds like he was predicting it.
I didn't see him, but I heard he wrote some memos talking about pandemic. I didn't see him. I didn't look for him either. But that was about the same time as I felt that we should do it. That was about the same time that I closed it down.
So at the time, though, when Peter Navarro did circulate those memos, you were still downplaying the threat of coronavirus in the U.S. You were saying things like, I think it's a problem that's going to go away within a couple of days.
It will go away.
You said within a couple of days, the cases will be down to zero.
Well, the cases really didn't build up for a while. But you have to understand, I'm a cheerleader for this country. I don't want to create havoc and shock and everything else, but ultimately, when I was saying that, I'm also closing it down. I obviously was concerned about it because I closed down our country to China, which was heavily infected. I then closed it down to Europe.
Do you feel like someone in among your staff or Peter Navarro himself should have told you about the memo earlier?
No, it was a recommendation. It was a feeling that he had. I think he told certain people in the staff, but it didn't matter. I didn't see it, but I did. I closed it down. I don't remember it even being discussed. We had a meeting where there were a lot of people. Most people felt they should not close it down, that we shouldn't close down to China, but I felt we had to do it. And that was at almost the exact same time as the memo.
Okay, just a couple things, Mika. A couple things. First of all, the president, when he says he closed it down, then he was feeling the same thing. No, he wasn't feeling the same exact thing. And by the way, I got to keep going back to this. When he said he closed it down, he didn't close it down from China. You know, 430,000 people got into the United States from China from the time of this outbreak. And even after he claims to have closed it down, he put so many exemptions on the travel ban from China that about 40,000 people got from China to the United States after he supposedly closed it down with his toothless ban. He should have shut it down. And then Europe, he talks about Europe. He goes, well, and then later on I did Europe. You know what? His own administration was begging him to shut down travel from Europe. His own administration, you can talk about, oh, well, this is what the WHO said, oh, this is what. No, people in his own administration were begging him, I think it was the HHS secretary, to shut down travel from Europe at the same time that he had this toothless ban that shut down part of travel from China. But he and Steve Mnuchin said, no, we're not going to shut down travel from Europe. We're not going to shut down travel from Italy. It might hurt the economy. And so we're not going to do that. It might panic the markets. So we had to wait another 2 or 3 weeks until there actually was a ban from Europe, a ban from Italy, a ban from some of the most infected countries on the planet. So he's lying about shutting it down. And Mika, as far as, we don't need a cheerleader. We don't need a cheerleader. We don't need like Ponzi, Potsy, or whoever the Happy Days cheerleader was. We don't need Potsy in the White House. We need a president in the White House that actually follows the advice of scientists, of doctors, of other people, Willie, who actually were warning the president starting on January the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, that a pandemic could be coming.
The president said of the Navarro memo, I didn't read it, but I basically did what the memo said anyway. He didn't do what the memo said. He had, as you say, the restriction on travel back to the United States, not for everybody, for some people from China. What those memos, what the pandemic playbook we're talking about is the preparation that comes before that pandemic arrives, which is stocking up on PPE, getting it to the hospitals in New York City. They're going to probably need it first. Getting the country ready, being honest with the country. Part of being a cheerleader for the country is saving the lives of the people. You can stay hopeful and optimistic and speak truth to the people. But here, actually, is what President Trump was saying about coronavirus and the outbreak around the times in late January when those Navarro memos were written.
Are the words about a pandemic at this point?
No, we're not at all, and we have it totally under control. It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine. We have a total of 15 people. And they're in a process of recovering, with some already having fully recovered. We're at that very low level, and we want to keep it that way. So we're at the low level. As they get better, we take them off the list, so that we're going to be pretty soon at only 5 people. And we could be at just 1 or 2 people over the next short period of time. And again, when you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to 0, that's a pretty good job we've done.
So Willie, we played 2 clips there. The first clip was a couple of days before the Navarro memo, when he was probably putting it together. That was the 22nd of January. And this is where the president said, oh, no, not worried about it at all. We got one person. Soon it's going to be gone. We played the second clip because it was almost a full month after the Navarro memo. Almost a full month after Peter Navarro told Donald Trump, the administration, 500,000 people could die from this pandemic. We are woefully ill-equipped if we don't get what we need. 500,000 Americans could die.
And we could have gotten what we need.
And we could have gotten what we needed. Ready. We could have gotten the testing ready. We could have gotten the PPEs ready. We could have been prepared. We could have started social distancing earlier.
It was possible to save lives.
But a month later, the president says in that clip, it's 15 people. A month later, we only have 15 people, and soon it'll be down to 0. So bringing us back, because the president lies so much in these press conferences, I still, for the life of me, don't understand why the networks, including our own, allow Donald Trump to lie for 2 hours to the American people. If he were giving good information, that would be one thing.
Let us fact check them.
But it is a lie. So if this network or CNN or Fox is going to run him lying for 2 hours a night, they need a real-time fact checker. Because in this case, Willie, this was February the 26th when Donald Trump said Only 15 people have it, and soon it's going to be down to 0. And of course, that's, again, almost a full month after Peter Navarro wrote his memo, a memo that Donald Trump said, oh, I believe the same thing I was doing. No, he didn't. Even a month later, he thought it was about 15 people instead of 500,000 deaths.
Yeah, and there was a second Navarro memo, by the way, right around the time of that second clip we showed, which was more dire than the first, saying we've lost a month now, here's how bad it could be now, and it was even worse than the first memo. So it's actually twice as bad, even as you're describing. I will say I think some of the networks are figuring this out and adapting. I know we come out of it, and our anchor, whoever it is that day, runs down a list of what the president just said and sort of debunks, if it needs debunking, those facts. So there is some evolution there. I think that's a good thing. And I would just ask
well, you know
Jonathan
what, though,
Lemire
Willie,
now,
though, you know what we don't need?
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. We don't need glibness when we come out of a press conference from the president, or people rolling their eyes going, oh, my God, and so he said this. They get distracted sometimes. I'm not just talking about our network, all the networks. They get distracted by the ground noise. Can you believe the president said this? Can you believe he tweeted that? No, just get the facts. Get his quotes. Get the death toll.
There you go.
Get the people in his administration that were warning him from early January. Put up his words, not your words. We don't care what you have to say. We don't care about your editorializing in April. Get his quotes. Get his words. Get his statements. Get the fact that he's trying to stop Americans from voting in the election by mail. And then get where the president says, yeah, I voted by mail because I'm allowed to do it, but you're not. That's basically what he said. I'm sorry, Willie. I'll let you go to Jonathan Lemire right now, but these can't continue unless they have a serious fact checker that cuts in while the president is lying to the American people. If he gives facts, great. I'm all for it. I said from the beginning of this, we're all in this together. I said from the beginning, I want the president to succeed because when he succeeds, we succeed and Americans don't die.
He's not
But
succeeding.
he's not succeeding. He's not trying to succeed. In fact, he's spreading misinformation. He's trying to cover up all the mistakes he's made over the past 2 months instead of looking forward, trying to save senior citizens' lives in Florida, in Arizona, in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Ohio, in North Carolina, in the only states he actually gives a damn about. Go ahead, Willie. I'm sorry.
As we've been saying all along, I would take every day, twice a day, a news conference from Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, just giving us the facts of what's going on. The president, of course, will never let that happen. That's why it's good we have people like Carol Lee, who was in the room yesterday and said, wait a minute, you voted by mail 1 month ago, and put him on the spot.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.